Hey everyone, this is Daniel,
And I'm Jun,
and we are
Korean.
American.
You can't have it one way or the other.
Oh, during the broadcast?
It has to be rotating.
No, but obviously the American election was the.
Okay.
So we'll keep it on my side. Hey Jun,
Hey, Daniel.
how's your weekend?
It was good. The weather, I think this is one of the blessings of global warming. We have a longer autumn season, I think, than
this
usual.
year.
Yeah.
At least this year, yeah, it got really cold, down to single digits Celsius.
Yeah.
Very low single digits Celsius, but it's back up now. It's warmer again.
Yeah. So I went to my parents' house in Daegu for my mom's birthday
Ah,
and my grandfather's 제사. Yeah. They
Well-
happen to coincide together. Oh,
happy
and
birthday to your mom. Yeah.
thank you. And my grandmother's 제사 too.
Oh, okay. So two Jessas.
Two 제사's, one birthday.
How far back do the Jessas have to go? Like, typically.
I think just one generation.
So you just celebrate. At most, you can have, let's say, four Jessas
Yes.
if all your grandparents have passed away.
Yeah.
I see.
Sometimes if you're a 큰집, sometimes they do multi-generation.
Oh, even more than that.
Yeah.
Wow.
But
that gets very
I
repetitive.
don't think it's a very common practice in modern Korea.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyways,
Yeah.
I just realized
Yeah.
how grateful I am.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
To go down to Daegu? Oh, June.
Yes, but also
Yeah.
how all three of them,
Yeah.
all the three family gathering occasions coincide together almost at the same day,
Yeah.
so that I don't have to travel 3 times and I can only travel once.
That is not where I thought this was going,
Yeah.
June. Wait, so you're grateful for the fact that you can minimize your trips down to Daegu?
Yeah. But I also empathize to my mom, because I think just right before my mom got married, my grandfather passed away. So her father-in-law, right? So imagine going into a house where your birthday is almost the same day with your father-in-law's 제사.
Yeah. Basically, a memorial of them passing away.
Yeah. The fact that she couldn't really celebrate her birthday that much.
Yeah. It's like having your birthday on Christmas or something else.
Or like 9/11.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a better analogy.
Anyways.
Yeah, dude, I thought you were going to say, like, oh, I'm so grateful now. I realize how much I appreciate all these traditions. And we need to hold on to them in modern Korea.
Of course. Yeah, that's a given.
I only have so many more years with my parents.
Yes. Now you're making me feel bad.
That's really where I thought you were going with that.
Yeah.
I see.
Anyways, do you know how Daegu is a very politically colored city in Korea?
I did not know this.
Yeah, it's one of the most conservative,
Oh, I did know this. I think you've mentioned that before. Yeah.
conservative leaning political cities in Korea. Yeah.
In the U.S., we would say it's a red state, but a red
Yeah,
city.
it's a red city. Yeah.
Also, we had a comment. Daegu is known for their apples.
Yeah, I knew that, but I didn't mention that
Okay.
because it's such a. I mean, I grew up listening to that
Yeah.
a lot,
It's like propaganda almost.
but I don't really think
The apples are that special.
apples are that special if you live in Daegu. Nor do I really think it's a fact. And I also heard that because of global warming,
Yeah.
you can't really produce apples anymore in Daegu.
Oh, sad.
Yeah, it went northwards.
That's sad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going for the fact that red apples, red state. That's it. Anyway.
But actually, the red apple state in the U.S. is a blue state, is it not?
Oh, what's known for their apples? Is it California?
The
Washington
red,
State?
or the Big Apple?
Oh, the Big Apple. Oh, yeah.
New York.
Why is New York called the Big Apple?
I actually
That's
don't know.
very confusing. I don't know either.
Yeah.
Oh, but June, excellent foreshadowing and lead into our topic today. We have to do do an audible in the sense that we really wanted to record an episode right after the U.S. presidential election. Not just presidential, we'll get into it, but after this past election cycle in the U.S. So yeah, today we're going to talk about politics.
Yes, which is a very sensitive topic.
I was going to say, and hopefully the least political way possible.
Yeah.
Okay. You're aligned. We're going to talk about politics, but try not to get political.
Without trying to express our personal political views.
Or to anger any side of the political spectrum. Obviously, we have our biases and leanings, but let's try.
Yeah. It just reminds me of the comment that we got last time. It was like, now I understand Jun's political views, which made me wonder what I said.
They neither stated why nor what your political leaning was. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So let's do it. This might be the last episode we ever record and publish, but
no, we'll try to be very politically correct.
Correct.
Anyways, the election happened.
Yeah. So
last week.
Last Wednesday here it ended. Yeah.
How do you feel about it? How it happened, the results?
Yeah, I think a lot of people before the election actually occurred. I heard this a lot. I just hope someone wins decisively so that there's no
divide.
Yeah, kind of back and forth or, recounts or just that it just doesn't get dragged out.
Yeah.
And we can move on, right, with the democratic process. So in a sense, I'm thankful that it was a pretty overwhelming victory, very decisive and clear. I don't know how else I can answer that question without getting in trouble. You may think from that statement I lean one way or the other, but Jun, actually, I'm not proud of this. I've never voted.
Oh,
it's in America. I feel such shame every time an election cycle comes around because I'm fairly apolitical, and I think
apolitical meaning that you're not doesn't necessarily mean that you're politically neutral, right? It just means that you're indifferent.
Yeah, I'm fairly indifferent, and this is something I really want to get into today. I just generally don't trust our political system that much. And obviously opting out is, you could say, like a cowardly way of participating or not participating. But yeah, I've just never really felt compelled to vote. And I think, okay, if I had to be honest, the main reason behind this is I think I've always lived in very blue states. So whether it's Maryland or California. And, in those two states, Democrats overwhelmingly win when it comes to the federal election. So in a sense, it's like, well, what does my vote matter, right? And I think the other part of this is growing up, my parents they voted a certain direction, but they were both just one issue voters. And in a sense, it's like, I don't know, it's maybe that's how the democratic process should play out. You pick the one issue that's most important to you, pick the candidate that you think represents that political viewpoint and vote for them. At the same time, it lacks so much nuance. And if anything, I think hopefully by now, like for me, I never see black and white. Everything for me is gray. Like I just see both sides, I believe, of almost every issue. And so it's hard for me to just confidently say, oh, we need to do X.
Yeah.
Because there's flip sides of, there's pros and cons to almost every single decision. So yeah, I know I might get a lot of hate for not being very anti-Trump. I think in the states I've lived in the social class circles, etc., I'm in, overwhelmingly, I think people are they're very liberal. Yeah, I guess is the one way to say it.
Yeah.
I just realized every single word is almost politically charged. So this is going to be a very hard episode. But anyway, yeah, I am not a very anti-Trump person. And I think most people, I agree with most people in that he's very morally questionable. I think his ethics and morals are very ironically not Christian, even though he represents kind of the Republican Party, which is historically very Christian based. At the same time, I might get a lot of hate. I'll stop qualifying after this. I might get a lot of hate for this, but I don't necessarily believe the character of our president matters that much. I think what's more important is just the policies and what they actually get done during their presidency. So yeah, I'll just stop there as far as intro goes. But yeah, TLDR, I was not surprised he won. But I think everyone did think it'd be 50-50. So I was surprised by how decisively he won. Yeah, I'll say that.
This might not be 100% true, but I heard that a lot of the, I guess, data was showing that it's going to be a decisive win. But then like all the media, which is most like media, like major media corporations in the US are left leaning. So they tried to mitigate that by saying it's going to be neck to neck.
Yeah.
But it actually wasn't.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's...
So I agree with you. I think most media is left leaning. And I think I was looking at a lot of different polls and sites that try to predict this.
Yeah.
And I think those are fairly apolitical. And a lot of them were flip-flopping back and forth. So I don't believe anyone thought it would have been this decisive going into it, to be honest. Yeah. It did feel, and maybe that's my liberal media echo chamber, but at least I was trying to find good data, and it seemed like it was pretty neck and neck.
I see.
Yeah. The problem is, Jun, a lot of the people doing the polls upon which the predictions are based, right? Who's sponsoring the polls, right? There's going to be some bias there, and so maybe they were looking for an outcome as well.
Yeah, I was just like naively, I would just like the media to depict the truth.
Jun, that is, everyone would agree with you.
Yeah.
But I will say the truth is very hard to
define.
Right?
Yeah.
And then obviously, as you know, like the news is a byproduct of this world that we're living in, which is in a sense, it's not news if it's not shocking, right? So you need some shock and awe value. You need some clickbaity headline. Otherwise, no one will read. And therefore, your media, can't even survive, right? Because it needs to run. It needs money to run, right?
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, I also realized that in line with how we want to try our best to be neutral in talking about politics today, we had no intention to match our shirts in black. Actually.
Oh, no, yeah.
Yeah, because in Korea, wearing black means that like it expresses that you're in remorse.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which has nothing to do with today's episode.
No, let's be clear. I actually looked for like a very over-the-top like American t-shirt, right?
But it is very neutral color. It's neither red or blue.
Black, yeah. That's true. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
But I wanted to get like, American Eagle, like bald eagle, American flag waving, like something like that. But I don't own anything like that. Yeah. So okay, let's move on. So Trump won. Not only that, I think the Republican Party gained seats in both the House and Senate. So Congress went more towards the Republican side as well.
I actually wanted to ask you that. A little bit about how American politics work.
Okay.
Like what is the House and what is the Senate and what are their roles and how are they different?
Okay. Yeah. For someone, if I had to rate myself on the political knowledge spectrum, 1 being completely ignorant, 10 being, incredibly politically qualified to talk about this. I think I'm a 2. So.
Yeah, so am I. So we're a perfect match to talk about politics.
Okay, we both. But I'd say I do think I might represent your average American. So that's the good thing. Okay. Sorry, before we get into that though, I wanted to cover really quickly what this means for Korea. Because I think going into it, my perception was a Harris win would have been better for Korea and a Trump win is worse for Korea. Namely because during his campaigning, I think Trump called out Korea at least once very... I don't know what the right word is.
They called us a money machine.
Yes. Yeah. So basically, Trump, I think, is saying that, hey, why are we putting so many troops in Korea? And to be fair, there are a lot of U.S. troops in Korea. I want to see upwards of 50,000, but it might be more. Do you know?
I actually don't know.
Let me look that up. Okay, sorry. So, Jun, currently there are, I think, about 24,000 active duty soldiers based in Korea.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, anyway.
I actually don't know. I don't even know what I would expect. Anyways,
But I think, Trump is basically saying, hey, if South Korea continues, if they want us to keep our troops there and they want us to continue protecting them, etc., then they need to pay up more, basically.
Yeah. I think Korea in general is one of the countries that is very influenced by the US, whatever they do, economy-wise, politics-wise. And it just shows in this poll or research that was conducted. I don't know exactly, I don't remember, but Korea was one of the highest countries that answered yes when asked, do you think the US presidential election is going to affect your country? I think more than 90% of people answered yes, which is one of the highest in the world, which is true also. I think Korea is very influenced by the US in two main aspects. Number one is the relationship with North Korea, which goes hand in hand with Trump's statement about how they're going to pull out the troops or make us pay. And also the global trading, because I think Trump's stance was very protective of the domestic market of the US. So they wanted like all the factories come back to the US so that they can reconstruct or like reboot the manufacturing industry. Which is, not, I don't think it's necessarily a good thing to Korea, but I don't know like in a bigger picture what's going to play out, like how it's going to play out.
Okay. I mean, but in the Korean media, what was the general sentiment, I guess, following the Trump win?
It's just like, I think when it comes to a presidential election of some other country, even though we're very affected, we're rather indifferent, I think.
Okay.
The public statement is at least,
But it wasn't like nervous about what's going to happen, brace yourself, bad for Korea, nothing like that in the headlines at least.
I don't think so.
Okay. Okay. Interesting.
Well, now that he is president, right? They're all trying to. They don't want to be on their nerves.
Congratulations, Mr. Trump. Like, we look forward to working with you for the next 4 years. I understand. Course, that makes sense. Okay. All right. So let's get back.
When you say that, it reminds me of how all the CEO of these big tech companies, they all
did the same
posted
thing.
like a tweet or whatever congratulating the win of Donald Trump.
There's so much to get into, Jun. Because
Yeah.
off that, I want to talk about basically, big tech in the US, again, overwhelmingly leans left, so
Yes.
more liberal. But I think one particular issue, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there has been a lot of talk and movement towards breaking up Google.
Yeah.
And so this is generally in line with I believe with the Democratic Party, which is they're very pro-worker.
Yeah.
So they want to limit monopolies. They're very pro-worker unions, raising the minimum wage, all these things, right?
Yes.
And so I think big tech, in a sense, was like, you're going to start coming after us. Obviously, it makes it harder to support them if you feel like your company's going to get broken up, right? So anyway, that's just a random aside. But
I think that's one of the very interesting points about the relationship between the tech industry and politics in the US, because it's kind of flipped in Korea. I mean, tech is always leaning more leftwards, but if you're like a large company that is very profitable, I think in Korea it's very natural to think that you lean more
Republican,
but it's like kind of the opposite in the States.
Yeah.
Where like most of the tech companies probably make most of the income that the US makes, almost a lot of it.
I don't know about
at least,
that, but
But they're like mostly left leaning. And I saw this very interesting data of like how much they funded each political party. And Apple's like 96% blue.
Yeah.
4% red.
Hold on, I forgot. I totally forgot I wanted to mention that.
Yeah. So Apple, Nvidia, Google, Meta is all more than 80% blue.
Yeah.
And then Tesla's 100% red.
I saw Elon Musk. I think that apparently now he's worth like $316 billion. I forgot how much exactly his net worth rose after the Trump win, but yeah. Jun, does that concept of basically individuals fueling the campaign and basically getting behind political candidates, is that foreign to you, or is that also happening in Korea?
I want to say it happens.
Yeah.
But it's very taboo to talk about.
I see. It happens like behind the scenes more?
I think so.
I see.
I don't even know if it's legal.
Okay.
I'm actually not sure. Yeah, but no one says it up front.
I think almost every American feels that it should be illegal. Yeah. These days, like getting elected, it basically comes down to who can raise the most money and then spend the most money on ads in the certain states where it matters. And so that feels wrong, right? That doesn't feel very democratic, right? We're all being manipulated by whoever has the most money to advertise in the few states, let's say the 7 to 10 swing states that matter, right? So
wait, but can you answer my former question? Why do you think the big tech companies are left-leaning when I think it's clearly not advantageous to their business?
I think this is a very complicated question. I'll try my best to answer. I think it comes down to what the Democratic Party has become, which is it's the party of the intellectual elite, in a sense. And I think people feel good. I think the intellectual elite wants to act, say, and vote in a way that appeals more to, let's say, their morals and ethics. Less so their, let's say, financial bottom line and interest, self-interest. So it almost feels noble to vote for something that you believe in, even if it's going to hurt you as a company, let's say.
That is really hard to believe, though.
No, I really believe that's true. And the reason why is when you're so, let's say, rich.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, right? And
like the way that you're running your company is kind of different from your personal political views, right?
Yeah, that's
true. If I were to be a CEO of a company, I would decouple my political views with like how it's going to be advantageous to my company. But this is not the case.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it also comes down to your reputation as a company. And let's say, there's a lot of people out there who I think, I could never work for a company run by, let's say, Elon Musk, because I don't like him as a person, right? And so where you choose to work, also this might sound crazy, but let's say in America, there's so many different great companies that are kind of equivalent, whether it's salary or work-wise or whatever. So you can choose which company you want to go to. And if one of these companies is run by someone who is, let's say, you really don't align with politically, it's like, well, do I really want to go work for that guy at that company? And so your company reputation matters. And again, if you're at least in the liberal echo chamber, let's say, and I want to be very clear, there's echo chambers on both sides, but it's like, if you're the free thinking, egalitarian, inclusive political side, like the intellectual one is democratic. And so you want to, if you want to attract and have those kinds of employees come work for you.
So I think they are being calculative too, but I think in the bigger picture, they think that being like having a more liberal stance
reputation
is better for
their company image.
I see. That's interesting.
Can you tell how hard it is for me to talk this episode? It's very uncomfortable for me. So
I think this shows how problematic modern day
politics is. It's so toxic.
Democracy is, I think, in general, that it's very difficult to talk about politics in general when it should be very to express your political views, right? It's too polarized.
Very polarized.
Anyways, I think that was one of my questions because it's one of the complete opposites when it comes to
Korea.
Two different political views, which is the conservative and the, I don't know, progressive, you want to say?
Progressive sounds like it's clearly good, right?
Yeah, but it is I think
yeah, I get it. Party that votes for more change is, let's say.
Yeah. Like the meaning of it is the complete opposite of conservative.
That's true.
Anyways.
I think that's fair.
Which my brother actually asked exactly yesterday. Like, why do you think the conservative party is called conservative when the word conservative doesn't have a really good image? Yeah. Whereas like progressive is always a good thing almost. But anyways.
No, it's true. I've thought about this before as well.
Yeah.
But I think that comes from your personal biases too. I suspect conservatives don't have the same connotation of the word conservative.
Maybe. Yeah.
Anyway, there's so much to talk about, Jun. I don't even know where to start.
I wanted to get into how like the different characteristics of each political party.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wait, before you do that though, I just wanted to. I think the Korean audience and the American audience might be shocked. Jun, how much do you think it costs to run for president in 2024? Just ballpark, how much money did each candidate raise and spend?
1,000 million?
$1 billion?
No. 100 million.
Oh, 100 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, that, at least
1,000 million.
no, you're on the right order.
Yeah.
I believe Kamala raised over $800 million. So pretty much close to $1 billion.
Wow.
And Trump raised over $400 million.
That's crazy.
It's crazy.
So she actually
She
raised more.
outspent him by a good amount. Yeah.
Interesting.
I should fact check this. Okay. According to the Wikipedia page on the Kamala Harris 2024 presidential campaign, she actually spent $997 million. So basically $1 billion. You weren't. 1,000 million was actually right. And let's see what Trump would have been.
I don't think we can constantly stop the conversation and fact check everything.
No, but just the order of magnitudes. Because this is $200 million, but I swear I looked this up and it was higher.
It's okay.
Okay. Anyway, they both spent many hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And Harris outspent Trump by a significant margin. Yeah.
Side note, this is sort of a side note, but I also wanted to mention that, you know how in your you said Harris, but before that you said Kamala and then Trump, which I think is a very interesting point of like
first name versus last name.
Yeah. How usually the female candidates are referred by their first name versus the male candidates are referred by their last name. Is that interesting? Because it was Hillary versus Trump last time.
Oh, that is interesting.
And then it was Kamala versus Trump. My theory is that maybe women tend to, like, their advantage is the more hospitable image, which is like calling them by their first name.
More friendly, conversational. Yeah, I see.
Maybe that's why.
Relatable. Yeah. Maybe. Okay. All right, Jun, let's move on.
Yeah.
I think we wanted to go kind of party by party.
Yeah.
And basically state what each party's known for. Okay, I think that's good.
Yeah.
Good compare and contrast.
Because Korea's political landscape is similar to the US, where it's dominated by the two major parties. Yeah.
Okay. I always want to caveat things. Can we talk about the two-party system briefly, though?
Okay.
Sorry. I'm all over the place, but...
I don't know if it's a system. It's just a result of how things are.
Yeah, but...
Because we are a multi-party system, technically.
I don't know all the details, but I've been told at least the way that, let's say, the parliament works in the UK, you can kind of vote on issues.
Yeah.
Not necessarily one of two candidates. And everything being tied together to the party.
Yeah.
And so you can say...
Interesting.
That's at least my understanding.
Yeah.
And I think... most people would agree this two-party system is quite broken right now because I think a lot of people, myself included, we consider ourselves more, let's say, socially liberal, but financially conservative. And there's no party that represents that, right? I think the Democratic Party at a high level is socially liberal and financially liberal, right? And the Republican Party is both socially and financially conservative. So there's nothing that represents the mix of those two, right? And I'm curious if Korea is the same. Basically, is there a general frustration that there's no party that, like, basically if you vote for one candidate, you're voting for everything along with them, and you can't kind of split that up at all? Anyway, that's like a big frustration, I think, for Americans.
Yeah, I think there are and still is a general public's criticism towards the current political landscape, which is just dominated by the two parties. And in Korea, we call it 양당 정치, like two-party politics almost. I don't want to call it a system because it's not designed that way, but I think it's just the result. I mean, throughout the history of Korean politics, there was always attempts where someone wanted to make a third party, and some were more successful, some were less, but it just never really took off, I think.
See.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, same in the US. Yeah. There have been attempts. I think Ross Perot was a famous one. maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And now, obviously, Bernie Sanders, I think, is one of the more popular independents. But yeah, typically, I think they're maligned as chipping away from the Democratic Party vote because they're more aligned with Democratic policies.
Yeah.
So then they always make them feel guilty for even running as an independent or existing.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, you're only supporting the enemy, quote unquote, right? The Republican Party. So
I think famously in Korea, it was this politician called An Cheol-soo. I think he's from Pangyo.
Oh, yeah.
Because he runs like a tech company here.
Yeah.
And he was like, his aspiration was always to create like the third party. But like, whenever he was like trying to, like, was on the verge of successfully doing that, there were a lot of criticism towards like, you're chipping away from the whatever Democratic Party or the Republican Party. And they just absorb. So it's always like a really important issue of like which party he chooses.
I heard his nickname's the Kingmaker, right?
Oh,
yeah. 'Cause he gets just enough popularity.
Yeah.
And then he tells his, people to, I endorse X or Y, and he kind of anoints them as the next president.
I think people, if they call him a kingmaker, it's in an ironic way.
That's not a good thing.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on.
We're all over the place.
Sorry, this is my fault.
But can you depict what are the political views of each party is in the U.S.?
Okay.
Yeah.
In general, or this past election cycle?
Oh, is that different?
I think it's morphing for sure. It constantly is in flux a little bit.
I see.
But okay, let's see. The Republican Party, I think the number one thing that they represented was basically inflation in the US is high. And it's getting harder and harder to basically survive. My wages are not increasing fast enough to keep up with the increased price in goods and stuff, right? So it's just getting harder to live. Most Americans, they don't have much savings. They're just kind of living paycheck to paycheck. And so I think the Republican Party kind of represented that more than other. Yeah, I think that's what they represented.
Isn't that so flipped though? Because you also said the Democratic Party is pro-union and the workers.
I do think it's flipped.
Yeah.
Too. And this is where I
weird.
think there's a gap between maybe what's presented and how the ads are targeted and what people are led to believe versus what actually is the truth. And this is where it gets really difficult, like I said earlier, right? It's hard to define the truth.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that was probably the number one issue. Basically, they made it seem like, hey, we're going to help you out more. But, and it's hard for me to say this without sounding very biased, but they also typically are the Christian party. And along with that comes two things. One, being anti-abortion. And two, being anti-gay rights, so LGBTQ rights. So I think that's typically the Christian base of the Republican Party. They're also historically known to be gun-loving, right? Gun-toting people. So against more gun control. And again, we'd have to always qualify and be clear. These are broad sweeping generalizations, right? A lot of gun owners themselves are pro more gun control, right? They want very responsible gun legislation. But anyway, so I think those are probably the things that define the Republican Party. The one that's an interesting one that led to my question earlier about then versus now, I believe they were also the first ones to say we should basically pull out of all wars outside of America, right? Namely Ukraine, let's say. And we should not be supporting the war in Ukraine at all and, try to get an end to that as soon as possible, even if, regardless of kind of the outcome, just like, let's not be involved in all these wars.
Yeah.
And it's a bit mixed because I do think historically, at least, the Republicans have been the one that are all for more government, military spending, et cetera, stronger military. But in this case, I do think they were the first ones to come out and say, like, hey, we shouldn't be involved in all these wars abroad. Yeah. The more liberal progressive party, the Democratic Party, they're known to be more pro-worker, right? So I said earlier, stronger unions, raising the minimum wage, breaking up monopolies. I'd say they're also the party for more social services. So increased taxes, but also spending more on things like healthcare, universal healthcare, or welfare and other things like that. So a lot of social programs. And I think they also are much more pro-environment in the sense that, regulation and trying to, make sure that we're doing what we can to negate climate change, etc. And then counter to the one I said earlier, I think the term that's been used these days is identity politics. And I don't know if that's, I don't actually know which way that leans, but being very inclusive, pro-gay rights, and yeah, basically being as inclusive as possible. Obviously, the trigger word or the trigger topic in this past election cycle was trans rights. I think that one was, I believe I read an article said the most effective ad run was basically targeting and saying Kamala was, all about trans movement, trans rights.
That was the most effective ad?
Most effective ad, yeah.
How many trans people are there in the US?
Yeah, again, this is why it's an effective ad. It's because if you position Kamala as the candidate that's, they're gonna have boys in your daughter's bathroom, right? Obviously that's very effective.
Yeah.
But to your point, I don't think the volume is anywhere near that.
You're saying the Republican Party's ad towards, I see.
Sorry if that wasn't clear. The most effective Republican ad was basically presenting Kamala as the candidate that's going to be all about just the trans rights and trans movement, etc. Where, to your point, Jun, I think she might be pro-inclusivity, etc., but it's definitely not the top agenda item in her campaign. So, okay, and then of course, Jun, we can't miss maybe one of the biggest ones too, which is women's reproductive rights. So, I think historically, and this is true today too, the Republican Party is for smaller government, and they want to have less federal government, let's say, regulation and ruling, and push more to the states.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, there's some things that should be universally given and granted, right? So I think those, and that's where maybe some of the friction is. Is abortion one of those things that should be across the board regulated at the federal level, or should it be given to the states to regulate? And so I think a lot of people, I have to say myself included, even though that it's hard for me to say, because I think a lot of Christians would be like, how can you call yourself a Christian if you're pro women's rights, women's reproductive rights, right? So, but I am. I believe abortion should be legal across the board. But yeah, maybe we'll cut that out. So anyway. Okay. Yeah, I'll stop, Jun. Okay. I'm a mess this episode. This is
okay. I'll try to depict the characteristics of the two parties in Korea.
Okay.
I think one of the big differences, by the way, in terms of how you call each party is interesting.
Okay.
Because in Korea, each party has a brand name. Like they have a name for their party.
Okay.
Whereas in the States, I believe they just call it the Democratic Party versus the Republican Party, right?
Those are the brands, yeah.
They don't have a name for it. Is that their official name?
That's their official name, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting because it's very generic. Whereas in Korea, they have like an actual name.
Like the PPP, right?
Yeah, 국민의힘.
Okay. The People's Power Party.
Yeah. But they change it every so often. Like,
do they really?
Yeah, before that it was like 새누리당.
What's that translate to?
New Nation.
New Nation. Okay.
Yeah. And then there was like 한나라당, like One Nation Party.
Okay.
So they like changed their brand. They have a name for their party, which is interesting. Anyways, the current Democratic Party is called 더불어민주당.
Okay. What's that translate to?
Democratic Together Party.
So pretty generic though, right? In a sense, would it be clear when I hear those two names side by side? What is the People's Power Party and the New Democracy Party?
Together Democracy.
Together Democracy Party?
Yeah.
I'm not sure which side I'm voting for, right? Both feel like both names are just generic political names to me.
But to be fair, the Democratic Party has the word democratic in it, whereas the Conservative Party doesn't.
Yeah.
국민의힘.
Yeah.
People's Power.
Okay. Yeah.
Whatever. Anyways, the Conservative Party, the current 국민의힘, is charactered more higher age, anti-North Korea.
Yeah.
Pro company.
Okay. Yeah, pro company.
Pro company.
Versus pro worker, right? Contrasting with the worker. Okay.
Pro company, pro economic growth, higher income, Christian.
Okay.
Pro America.
Okay.
And regionally, it's more based on the Gyeongsangdo region. Or in Seoul, it would be the more higher income region.
Okay.
And then this is a very interesting recent thing. Younger men.
Oh.
Men in their 20s.
Okay.
And I will get into this later.
Yeah.
Why it is. And for their, like, the media that is supportive of this company is like the more traditional newspaper media, which we call in Korea 조중동, which is short for 조선일보, 중앙일보, and 동아일보.
Okay.
They're more, I think, supportive of the Conservative Party. And they're like, one of their bad images, I would say, is that they're corrupt.
Wow, you just come out and say it. Okay.
Oh, it's just the public image of
okay.
if you're anti-conservative, that's what you're always targeting.
Okay. And sorry, by corrupt, you mean that they'll just put out whatever the Conservative Party wants them to?
Or like be
Get
like
paid for?
someone too integrated with companies.
Got it. Understood.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the Democratic Party, currently called 더불어민주당, is more younger age. But now I think because the 20s is more polarized, it's more 30 to 40-ish.
Okay. Yeah.
Pro-feminism. I don't want to say pro-North Korea, but they have a better relationship with North Korea, or at least they try to. Anti-company, more about welfare and distribution than growth, I think. More pro-China. Regionally, it's more, their big support comes from the Jeollado region. And then they're more into inclusivity, equality, equity, DEI, all that. Low income and the unprivileged. And this is interesting because their supporting media is famously JTBC.
Okay.
But that comes from one of the pro-conservative newspaper companies, 중앙일보.
Yeah.
It's their television broadcast company. But for some reason, JTBC is very left-leaning.
Yeah. And the parent newspaper is right-leaning?
I don't know how that works. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but that's my understanding.
I see.
And then currently MBC.
Okay. Yeah.
One of the national broadcasting companies. And their criticism towards the public criticism, if you are anti-Democratic Party, they would call them 빨갱이. Or communist.
Okay.
Yeah, because they're more pro-North Korea.
Trigger word.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, we have to talk about that later, by the way, Jun.
By the way, in the current national parliament, we have 300 seats.
Okay.
And 170 is the Democratic Party.
Okay.
And then 108 is the
others.
Yeah. Why? I don't know why that. Oh, yeah.
Doesn't add up to 300.
Yeah, because there are other parties too.
22 independents?
Or like some other party.
I got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Jun, I wish I could have just taken your structure and inserted the American equivalent. Oh, it's so clean. Okay. Because you mentioned a few things that are, I think, identical, but I left out. Again, the city, the dense urban areas, they go blue, so they're more Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And then the less dense rural areas are red or Republican. So. And then what should we do next? I think we can go into that socialism versus communism thing, but maybe what were the differences though, if there were any? I can't think of a single thing that diverges. Oh, that's what I wanted to bring up that I didn't. Okay, Jun, one thing that jumped out to me, I did not mention this for the American side, but the media split seems pretty even. Maybe the medium itself, like newspapers are more right-leaning in Korea, and the TV and other...
The newspaper media is more... Yeah, it is more right-leaning, yeah.
And like the media is more, the newer TV shows and broadcast companies are more left-leaning. But what jumped out to me was it seems like it's fairly split. Would you say that's true? Like there's equal representation on both sides. Whereas in America, like you said, which is true, I think it's very left-leaning overall. There's Fox News, which is more right-leaning. But I think every other news outlet's more left-leaning. So
I don't know what the fact is, but each party would think that they're disadvantaged.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But if both parties feel that way, then it probably feels like it's pretty split.
I don't know. Yeah.
I've never heard of a liberal in the US lamenting the fact that, oh, we're underrepresented in media, etc. I think most liberals recognize that they're overrepresented as far as media goes.
Yeah. Okay.
And then
So Fox News is the more right-leaning. Yeah.
The other thing you mentioned that stood out to me, I think there's an equivalent in the US. I just don't know as much. You did say as you get older, you lean more conservative. So I think that's a fact in the US too. Even a lot of people who are more liberal in their 20s and 30s, let's say, as they grow older, they become more conservative, whether they have more money or maybe anyway, I think as you get older, you tend to become more conservative. But the other thing you mentioned was there's this growing divide in the 20s, specifically 20s men leaning more conservative. And again, I don't have the facts to back this up, but I do believe there is this trend or movement as well in the US. So yeah, maybe we could talk about that for a bit.
Yeah, that's a very recent thing. It's because there's this huge issue about feminism in Korea recently, or more like radical feminism is experiencing a backlash, especially from the younger men. And I think it's because that political view of like radical feminism, it gained popularity amongst women because I think traditionally in Korean society, because of like the societal order having foundations in Confucianism, resulted in very unfavorable conditions for the women traditionally. I think that was a fact. So I think that's why I think feminism gained a lot of popularity amongst the women in Korea. But then I think the degree of inequality of genders is lesser than it was before in modern day Korea, which is what the 20s or teens are experiencing. So when they view radical feminism, to them it doesn't really make sense. They think that it's discriminating towards men now. And that's why I think 20s men have like anti-feminism political views. And especially because they have to, I think military service has a big play in this because it's giving like this burden to a certain gender. That is a fact, right? So I think that's why 20s male in Korea is very anti-feminist in general. I mean, individually, they might have different opinions. And that's why 20s male is more pro-conservative party.
Based on that one, I guess, topic or one issue, right? I see. I guess one thing I have to ask, though, policy-wise, how does that play out? Right? So, yeah, is there a policy that the, let's say, conservative party wants to push that is the divisive issue here? When you say pro, I think more feminism. Again, I want to know what that leads, like how does that play out as far as a policy, right?
Oh yeah, like I think there was a policy for, let's say, companies to give more points, like additional points to people who served in the military, like so basically men, which is like disadvantage for women. And I think that's a really important issue for the younger generation because they're like the age of when they're first trying to get into a job.
Sorry, points as far as getting a job.
Yeah, like in their recruiting system.
I see. So something equivalent of, let's say, affirmative action. So if two candidates are equal, let's give it to the man because of military service holding them back in a sense.
Yes.
I see. Interesting.
And I think the Democratic Party banned that, like made that illegal for the companies to do. I think that's how politics.
That makes sense.
Or policies have an effect in the gender issue.
Is there any policy or is there any party that's pushing for forcing women to also participate in the military obligation? Because that'd be my first immediate response is like, oh, let's make it equal, right?
I think that's very difficult for either party to push because half the population are women, and actually,
it would be very unfavorable.
No one wants to do that. They don't want to go against half the population.
I see.
Okay. I think there are people individually who say that. Not necessarily making women to go to the military, but do like a substitute.
Some sort of service. I see.
But it's very difficult for political parties to push that policy.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like what policy, how do you quote unquote make it right for men having to serve, being obligated to do 18 plus months of military service? It is really hard. Like I can't think of something that's equal to that, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, my immediate reaction as an American would be like, oh, just, force women to also do their military obligation or some sort of obligation in lieu. But yeah, you're saying it would be very unpopular.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Jun. You mentioned when parties are kind of throwing words and name calling each other.
Yeah.
One party, I think the liberal party would call the conservative party corrupt.
Yeah.
But the conservative party would call the liberal party communists.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about that a bit. Because I do realize that's a trigger word in Korea, and for obvious reasons, I think.
Yeah.
But in America, and even I wasn't aware of this until I'd say more recently, the word socialist is seen as a bad word in American politics. And I guess I understand the roots of it, but to be honest, I think it's a bit unfair. And I think there are really good parts of socialism. And actually, I think probably all democracies tend towards socialism over time. But anyway, let's talk about that communism or 빨갱이, right?
빨갱이.
Calling them a red
Yeah.
versus calling someone a socialist in America.
So I think the difference between communism and socialism is that communism is an economic system and the socialism is a societal system, and that is kind of different.
Yeah.
I think calling like communism is a very taboo word in Korea.
Yeah.
And I think no one, I don't want to say no one, but most people are anti-communism.
Okay.
But I think it's a little bit looser when it comes to socialism. I think some more progressive or liberal political parties tend to say out in public that they want to reference the European socialism model, which I think is kind of like in line with Bernie Sanders' political views. Bernie Sanders never wants America to be communism, but he wants to implement some like socialism values to the US, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of different. So yeah, in the US, you're saying calling someone a socialist is a bad thing.
Yeah, I want to dive into that a bit.
Yeah.
But before we get there, so communist, it's obviously from like the North Korea, China thing, right?
Yeah.
Right? Sorry, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We never mentioned that.
I think calling a communist being a very taboo word in Korea definitely has to do with our situation with North Korea. Yeah.
And it probably started from, the Korean War, right?
Yeah.
Maybe educate me just briefly. At the time, was the North Korea as an extension of China? Were they advocating for a communist government? Is that what they were really pushing for, or?
So I think there were a lot of like social leaders that were upheld in society right after the Japanese era, because these people are mostly they were part of the independence movement. So when the Japanese era ended, a lot of these people who are the leaders of the independence movement gained a lot of popularity.
I see.
And their political or like economic system views kind of were split. Some people were more pro-communism and some people were more pro, how would you call it, capitalism.
I see.
Right?
Yeah.
So there were different leaders, and I think that was very natural in the 1940s and 1950s, right? Because like the world was still trying to figure out what was the right way of like economical system, right? So I think one of the big communist leader was Kim Il-sung, who was like the founder of North Korea, right? Okay. What it is right now.
So he was pro-communism.
Yeah.
I see. That's where it all starts from.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. This is a random aside, but I have to bring it up now. I remember going through the Korean Museum of Modern History or something, and I bring this up a lot because it was so shocking to me. I don't think Korea had its first full democratic election until 1989, after the Seoul Olympics.
Yes.
This for me is mind-blowing. I don't know why, but it's a very new democracy in that sense, right? It's 30 plus years old? Yeah. Anyway, it's just it puts things into perspective for me.
Yeah, because the first president of Korea was the president Lee Seung-man.
Yeah.
And then Yeah, basically the next major government came from a coup, which is Park Chung-hee.
Yeah.
Am I right? Yeah, there were presidents in between, but I don't think they were significant. And then after he got assassinated, so like there was another military coup,
Yeah.
which was the next government. Yeah.
Yeah. It's Jun, for me, again, being so ignorant of history, just imagining Seoul hosting the Olympics, but not being like a democracy, for me felt it was just like almost a time warp, because I guess I associate democracy with like a modern government,
Yeah.
a modern fair government. That's just how I think.
Yeah.
Right. So, but understanding that Korea was not really like that until very recently. Yeah.
Some
it's
people
interesting.
might argue that the 1989, you said, elections wasn't even a democratic
process.
either, because he was like close friends with the former president.
I see.
Yeah.
Who was a military coup
Yeah.
leader takeover. Okay.
He was one of the military coup members too.
Communism to me, when I don't know all the deep values of it, but I feel like they're aligned with Confucian values a bit. And
Really?
Korea as a isn't it like
That's very
everyone
interesting.
shares equally? Like, isn't that the idea behind communism?
But is that the value of Confucian?
It feels that way.
Confucianism? How do you call that?
See, I don't even know why. Yeah, Confucianism or Confucius beliefs.
Yeah.
They seem to be aligned to me.
Really?
I don't know. Traditional values, all in harmony, all equal. No.
I don't think that rings a bell to me.
Oh yeah. So it's interesting why for me they do seem aligned, and maybe it's just this like Asian things, right? It's just, and so I always found it a bit interesting that communism is such a dirty word in Korea. Sorry, it's not surprising, obviously, because of the North Korea, South Korea tensions.
Yeah.
But when you take that aside and just look at the core political beliefs, it seems to resonate with like what Korean society at least used to uphold and value. So I always found that a bit interesting.
I don't think Confucianism had anything, like their values had nothing to do with economical values in general. What's interesting to me is that Confucianism in Korea is sort of like the equivalent of conservatism in Korea. So I think if anything, Confucianism is more in line with the conservative political view, which is anti-communist.
Anti-communist.
Yeah.
The most anti-communist.
Yeah.
Interesting. Anyway, this is where I'm in over my head. Like this is not a comfortable topic for me to talk about. I just recognize I'm not well versed. But anyway, okay. The equivalent, maybe trigger word in America would be calling someone a socialist. Again, which I think that implies, let's say, bigger government, a lot of government-run organizations, and higher taxes, and then more social programs, right? Whether it's universal health care, whether it's welfare, fair housing, like all these things, right? So I think the core of it gets to socialism is being portrayed as being opposite of capitalism, right? And capitalism's all about just let the free markets do their thing, right? Competition will produce the best product, and price will go down because everyone's competing, etc. And I think there's a lot to it, right? When you look at government spending, how much has increased. Clearly, I think everyone would agree when the government runs things, it's less efficient.
Yeah.
Maybe it's more fair and equitable, but it's less efficient, right? And so it just creates this drag on your overall economy and output.
Yeah.
And so I think those, socialism being presented as the opposite of capitalism is where people get like, oh, that's so anti-American, right? America's all about free markets, all about capitalism. Even though when you let capitalism run its course without any regulation, it becomes a very unfair and kind of difficult society, I think, to get behind. But yeah, I wanted to compare those two because I do think, I don't know why socialism became this trigger word in American politics, but I do believe it has become one.
I have a lot of questions to ask.
Okay.
In regards to American politics, I think one of the very foreign concepts when it comes to the presidential election in the States for Koreans is the electoral vote system.
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of interesting?
It's very interesting. Why isn't it just a popular vote? Yeah.
Yeah. Why isn't why isn't like more directly voting towards someone, right? Because like I think it was brought up during the Hillary versus Trump election.
Hillary won the popular vote.
Yeah, so more of the population voted for Hillary, but still Trump wins, right? That system is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I don't know the full roots of it, but I do believe it's intended to protect these smaller states and their rights.
Yeah.
So what you're describing would be maybe called a direct democracy, where each individual just votes for the president, and let's say the popular vote takes it, right?
Yeah.
I do believe the Electoral College was instituted to support the smaller states and protect them, right? So preventing, let's say, the 3 most populous cities in the country from dictating what needs to happen to the whole country, right? So,
but like, isn't the number of votes proportionate
to your population?
Yeah. In that case, isn't it the same?
I don't know why it's winner take all per state, to be honest. I think a lot of people are confused by it.
Yeah.
And how we got here. But anyway, yeah, so
I do think it's well representing the idea of the US, which is the United States, right? So
Yes.
each state sort of represents and has their political views, and which accumulates to like an overall agreement, I think.
yeah. At the same time, right, I think a lot of people would criticize this by saying, oh, why does 50,000 voters in one of these swing states, they could potentially determine the entire election, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there's some criticism there that's valid. It always feels a bit weird when you're in one of these heavily blue or heavily red states. It's like, oh, my vote doesn't matter that much towards the president. It just comes down to those few swing states where their entire electoral college votes go to one candidate and could swing the election, right? So, yeah. For the record, Jun, I think almost every American would be equally confused. So, yeah.
I also wanted to talk about, when we were talking about medias, I also wanted to talk about how podcasts were very influential in this election, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know about Harris, but I do know that Trump was in like a couple of one of the most popular podcasts in America, which is the Joe Rogan Experience and also Lex Fridman. And how do you think that influenced the results of the election?
Yeah, and there's another one I'll throw in. I think it's the All In podcast. So I think they both, all those podcasts featured all of Trump and all of the Republican candidates more than the Democratic candidates. I definitely think they played a role for sure.
Yeah,
mainly because in a sense, what's great about podcasts is you have your own free distribution channel, right? So you can go around the traditional media, which, as we've discussed in the US, is very left-leaning. So it gave, I think, the Republican candidates a platform to just go directly to their audience. At the same time, right, they're moderated by people that may be biased one way or the other. So I don't think podcasts portray themselves as unbiased or a true, let's say, debate type forum. But it is just a way that they can get their message out there and engage and talk directly to different voters. So, yeah, I think podcasts as a platform going around traditional media, let's say whatever, newspapers and TV channels, etc. I think that's the role they played. But yeah, some of these video podcasts on YouTube, they have millions of views. So clearly it got the message out there. Yeah.
So do you think these podcast channels have like a political view? Like the Joe Rogan and Lex Fridman.
Yeah, isn't Joe Rogan pretty known to be?
I have no idea.
Oh, yes. I don't know all of these firsthand, but yeah, I think everyone has a leaning. Yeah,
I see.
I don't know if there's space, sadly, in modern politics to be center. Maybe that sounds off, but that's at least what it seems like. You have to have a leaning, otherwise you'll have no audience.
Yeah.
Okay. 2 things I wanted to cover still. Famous families, just if there's any, I don't know. And then U.S.-Korea relations, I think, is an interesting one we can go deeper on. But yeah, basically how U.S. politics does affect Korea. So, okay. Yeah, Jun, are you aware of any famous political families in America?
The Kennedys. The
Any
Bush
others?
family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess now maybe the Clintons. I don't know.
Clintons.
Yeah. I feel like their daughter at one point was well positioned to
Oh, really?
make a political career. But anyway, yeah. Are there any equivalent famous families in Korean politics?
Not necessarily that I know of. The only like generational political family was the Park Jung-hee
Yeah, yeah,
and then
yeah.
Park Geun-hye.
Yeah, it was actually the father was the president, and then
Yeah.
later,
The
generation
daughter.
later, the daughter was the president.
Yeah. That's
you
pretty
know-
much it.
Now that we talk about it, Korea's had a female president before.
Yes.
America has not.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I believe you said one of the presidents was educated or grew up in the U.S. Is that right?
Oh, the very first president, Lee Sung-man.
Yeah. Yeah.
He, for that time,
Yeah.
it was like 30s, 40s. He studied in Princeton.
Yeah.
Which is very rare, isn't
It's
it?
crazy.
Yeah.
I would just say it's very progressive in my mind, right?
Yeah.
For the president of Korea to have been educated in America, as well as also for Korea to have had a female president.
Yeah.
So, Kamala was famously being put forth as the first female and first, I think, Asian. We have to talk about that. Asian candidate as well. Yeah.
To be fair, I feel like the former female president, Park Geun-hye, I don't think a lot of people voted for her because she's female. I think they were basically voting for her father.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Jun.
And famously, I think the most famous political family is the Kim family.
Up north.
Yeah.
My distant relatives. Okay. Jun, I almost forgot we have to bring this up. So, I don't know how much of an overview we should provide, but every election cycle, which is every 2 years in America, president, of course, is voted on every 4 years. But there's also the entire House of Representatives. So the House of Representatives is voted on as well as 1/3 of the Senate. So these are the three formed parts of the federal government.
Yeah. Tell me about that system.
Oh, do we want to talk about this?
Yeah.
Okay. But first, let me congratulate, though. I almost forgot. Andy Kim is the first Korean American senator to serve in the U.S. Senate. So it's a big deal. Yeah, he's representing New Jersey.
Yeah.
So whenever I read this guy's posts on Instagram or whatever, I mean, this guy's like, oh, he's like me.
Really?
I suspect his knowledge of Korea, etc., is like equivalent of mine. Yeah. So I don't know. It's pretty awesome to see a Korean American get elected to the U.S. Senate. It's crazy.
Is he second gen? Do you know?
I'm pretty sure he is.
If someone had to become the first Korean American Senate, I think it would have come from either Los Angeles or New Jersey, which I think has the biggest Korean American population, right?
Yeah, I think Los Angeles and New York, but New Jersey basically being like a suburb of New York.
Yeah.
That makes sense. But yeah, obviously there's a huge Korean American population in North Jersey in particular. Yeah. But yeah, maybe, Jun, I'll give an overview then of the U.S. federal government. Yeah. So obviously there's the president. They get elected every 4 years.
Yes.
And their term limit, they can only serve 2 terms. The other part of that is called Congress. Congress is made up of 2 different parts. One is the Senate. So there's 100 senators. Every state gets 2, regardless of size and population. So 2 senators from every state, and then the House of Representatives, and that's based on population. I don't know exactly how often that gets redistributed, but again, in the House of Representatives, there's 435, and that basically is...
That's kind of like the parliament then, is it? Is that the legislative branch, Congress?
Congress, I think, is legislative branch. You might know better than me. But yeah, Congress, 435 House of Representatives. You get representatives proportionate to your population. So this is where like the state size
for
starts
each
to play
state.
in more. Yeah,
Okay,
so obviously California being the most populous state has the most representatives, followed by New York, I believe, and Texas, etc.
Okay.
So maybe Texas is higher than New York. I don't actually know.
Yeah. So the Congress has the Senate and the what you said?
House of Representatives.
House of
Yeah, the
Representatives.
House.
How are they different?
Usually when a new law or bill gets proposed, it has to first make its way through the House and then gets voted on by the Senate. And so they're almost...
Why?
I don't know, dude.
It's such a unique system. And so like in general, like describing this in a very dumb way,
Yeah.
does the Senate have more power than the House of Representatives? Because I
Yeah,
think that like Andy Kim being like the first Korean American senator ever was such a big deal.
Yeah,
But there might have been more Korean Americans in the House of Representatives.
Oh, there
right?
are many
Yeah.
Korean Americans in the House.
So it's like a much of a bigger deal.
Honestly, I don't know what differentiates the two. Because in a sense, okay, Senate votes later. But if the House doesn't pass something to begin with, right, it never gets to the Senate. So is one really more powerful than the other? But
How
I
many
do think in the
Senates?
hierarchy, there's fewer senators. So that alone makes it more
How many did you say?
100. So
100,
every state
okay.
has 2.
Okay.
So that alone makes it more exclusive. Senate terms are also 6 years. So you basically are voted into office for much longer. Whereas I think the House gets overturned every 2 years. Yeah, so. Interestingly, maybe not interestingly, there are no term limits for Senate or House. So basically, you can be a lifelong senator, lifelong House of Representatives. Whereas obviously the president has 2-term limits, so you can serve at most 8 years. Yeah,
Well, in Korea,
yeah,
I think it's pretty much the same in the U.S. too. But like, there's this rule of separation of power of like 3 different powers, right? Which, why are you laughing?
no.
Sort of like
Checks and balances. Is that
balances
what you're saying?
each other. The legislative branch,
Oh, you're totally right. Yeah,
Yeah.
federal legislative and judicial.
legislative branch,
Yeah,
which creates the laws, I think, and then the judicial branch, which sort of like judges if you go against the law, I guess.
yeah,
And then the executive branch who executes the law, right? And then the president is the representative of the executive branch, but also represents the country as a whole. Yeah.
yeah.
Is the presidential system, I think, in general.
But then what else is in the executive branch besides the president? Oh, they have this whole like cabinets and stuff. Oh. Jun, I had a question. I heard in Korea there's a prime minister.
Yes, which we call 총리.
Okay. Well, what
국무총리?
do they do? And what are they in charge of? Because there's no prime minister in America. Yeah.
In my limited understanding, I think the prime minister is sort of like the vice president. They are second in rank in the executive branch. But I think the president somehow represents the country as a whole.
Yeah.
So I think maybe the prime minister has a lot more to do with the actual work in the executive branch.
get
I
it.
might be wrong, but yeah. The difference between the VP system in the US is that in the US, the president and the vice president run together.
Yes. Yeah.
They form a team and run together
Yeah.
in the election.
Yeah.
Whereas in Korea, it's the president solo who runs the election, and then when they win later, they appoint a prime minister.
Yeah. So I believe at least that part's the same in America. The vice president's not voted on; they're appointed.
Yeah.
But that's a huge difference from American politics. So the prime minister is appointed after the president wins. Is it generally well known who they will appoint, or is that kind of a big suspenseful, thing that gets decided after?
We don't know, and a lot of times it gets vetoed by the parliament.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, wow. All right.
Or yeah. So
Okay.
I think it's very well known in Korea that it's very rare that the first person who the president appoints becomes the
picked.
prime minister. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a very different system. So does that mean the prime minister and president aren't necessarily aligned politically?
Well, there usually are because the president appoints
Has
them.
to appoint someone, but they have to appoint someone that the parliament will pass, right? What
think
did you
so.
call the 300 people in Korea?
The parliament.
Yeah, the parliament has to vote on them and pass. So it has to be someone maybe more moderate. No?
Yeah. Or it doesn't have like a very critical flaw.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Someone clean. Interesting.
Yeah.
In the US, basically the vice president.
I'm not sure. Maybe there's no right for the parliament
To
to veto the prime minister. I might be wrong.
Okay. But in the US, the VP pick is very important because, it's very strategic who you pick as your VP. They have to complement your weaknesses, but also be strong in a state in the US where you might not necessarily win, because typically if
I see.
the VP is going to carry whatever state, and then win the vote there. So it's very strategic.
Yeah, I think the VP in the US sort of like supplements the lacking of the president, the presidential candidate.
Yeah,
right?
in America. Yeah.
Yeah, like Kamala Harris's VP was like a very white grassroots man.
Yeah,
which is kind of like the opposite of Kamala.
Yeah, exactly. And on that on that note too, I think Trump's VP pick was, highly intellectual. But okay, then the prime minister is in charge of ministries in Korea, right? Like you have the Ministry of Education and different those things.
Yeah.
I think the similar in the US, the president appoints their cabinet, and those cabinet members are then in charge of respective departments. So
these political terms are so confusing. Why is it called a cabinet? To me,
I
a
don't
cabinet
know.
is like an office furniture.
Something you put your dishes into.
Yeah.
I don't know the origins of that word, but
Interesting.
yeah. So and those are all appointed though, right? So I think it's very, and that's part of I think why people were enamored by Trump. He had Elon Musk. Basically, he had RFK, I think, is someone that he was going to appoint to run some other department in the U.S.
Is that a Kennedy?
Yeah, Robert Kennedy Jr.
Yeah.
Who famously went against his, Democratic Party roots to endorse Trump. And so in that sense, it was like, oh, if you vote for Trump, you're voting for all these other people that are going to come in and run different departments in the U.S., right? So, okay.
Is Elon Musk going to run a department in the U.S.?
Honestly, I don't think so, but I think he'll be in this cabinet advising at least a lot of different policies and things like that. So, yeah, for better for worse, a vote for Trump was a vote for Elon.
Yeah, Tesla stocks
skyrocketed.
Yeah.
Which this all seems a little bit, again, this idea that individuals should benefit so much financially from a different political winner. I don't know. Feels kind of wrong. Yeah. Dirty is the right word.
Yeah. I also wanted to talk about like the separation of power thing.
Yeah.
I think the Korean public had a chance to really witness how it works during the impeachment of the former president.
Clinton.
No,
Trump.
the Korean.
The Korean president. Okay.
Trump was never impeached, actually.
Yeah.
They tried to.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so in Korea, because it actually happened, and that's when like the separation of power really shows how it works.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
So I think for you to initiate the impeachment, it has to start from the legislative party. And if like more than half of the parliament agrees to pass the law to impeach the president, then it goes to the judicial branch where they sort of examine it and see if it actually is fair to impeach the president. And so the final ruling of the impeachment came from the judicial branch.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was like, I mean, regardless of the political views of whether the impeachment was right or wrong, it was a good chance for the public to witness how the separation of power works.
And sorry, you're saying the former president in Korea was impeached?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you didn't know?
No, I mean, I know nothing about American politics. I would know even less about Korean politics.
President Park Geun-hye.
That president.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do I want to bring up about this? Oh, okay. So the Korean judicial branch, in the US, it would be the Supreme Court. There's a huge deal there because
I think the Supreme Court is a part of the judicial branch.
Well, let's say it leads the judicial branch in America. Those are appointed, I think.
Yeah.
And sorry, they're not only appointed, those terms are for life.
Yeah.
So those 9 Supreme Court justices, basically if you get a more, let's say, conservative leaning Supreme Court justice, they're there for life and they're going to continue to vote according to their biases, right? So is that similarly in Korea? And like, is there huge controversy every time a Supreme Court seat is open and which president's going to appoint who, et cetera?
I think it's pretty similar, but I don't know if they are appointed for life. That part I think is very confusing for the US system too.
I agree too. I don't know why it's for life.
Why all of a sudden, right? So I think there are a total of 13 Supreme Court judges in Korea, whereas you said it was 9.
9, yeah.
And you call them justices.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool.
It's cool. Dude, I think the term minister is cool. The ministry of something. It sounds so formal compared to like department of whatever. Yeah. Jun, there's something I believe is true, but I wanted to run by you. Is it true that the past like 4 sitting presidents in Korea are all in jail?
They were at some point.
Yeah, they were all imprisoned, right?
Except for the most recent former one.
Oh, they broke the trend.
Yeah,
that's good.
I don't think he was ever in jail. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, all the presidents before that were.
See, I think that's wild. I don't know why.
Most, not all, most.
Okay. Yeah. But it's very common that once the new president comes in, they make the old president go to jail, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. This just feels normal to you. But for me, that sounds crazy. And I don't know, very retributive and
revenge, right?
Yeah, it's just like it seems very like revenge oriented, which I don't necessarily think is healthy. Yeah,
it is not.
Would most Koreans agree that it's unhealthy, or are they like, yeah, get that bad guy in jail?
I think they have mixed feelings.
Okay.
They do have that like get that bad guy in jail kind of sentiment too.
Yeah, because
there are a lot of people who are very like invested in politics and they're almost like too invested in politics almost. But I think this all changed. Like the sentiment sort of changed when one of the presidents committed suicide because of that.
Oh my goodness. One of your former presidents committed suicide?
Yeah.
Recently?
Yeah, like 10 years ago.
That's wild to me too. Jeez.
Yeah, because of like he was going through a lot of investigations after the next president came, and like they shamed their family and like on the public. So right before, almost like he was on the verge of getting jailed.
Prosecuted, yeah.
Yeah, he killed himself.
Jun, that's so heavy. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You didn't know?
No, I didn't know. I mean, former presidents going to jail, committing suicide. You know, Trump's being heavily prosecuted as well in America. And, you know, if he broke the law, he should go to jail. I agree with that. But I think most people would say being president of the United States is the hardest job in the world.
Yeah.
One of the most important and stressful, etc. Look, I'm not saying anyone should be able to break the law, but when you're doing your job, having the pressure of knowing like you're probably going to jail after in Korea, I mean, that just seems so hard to deal with. I don't know. Like, why would anyone want to run for office or become president if it means you're going to jail afterwards?
Yeah.
And anyway, it's Korean politics, as dirty as American politics is, I'd say Korean politics sounds even more scary for politicians. I don't know if you'd agree with that, but it gets to a point I want to make and I want to talk about with you. I think both countries really, let's say, like to complain about the political system, and point out all of its flaws. But I do think one thing in Korea that I really like and respect, it feels like you guys still trust your government in a sense. And there's still accountability for the government, right? Whereas in America, I think the number one feeling for most citizens is, we don't trust our government. We don't trust that they're doing it for us. You know, all they care about is getting reelected. They're just out for themselves, right? And secondarily, it's like, even if they were to do something bad or break the law, et cetera, it feels like there's no accountability in the U.S. government. You know, they're above the law in a sense. And so I think those two things for me in Korea, the fact that citizens might not like their government, but they trust that it's operating, you know, let's say transparently in a sense. And two, like there's accountability to be had if they do something really, really bad. It feels like that's stronger in Korea than America.
I think a lot of Korean people might disagree, but I think it's all relative too, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't know how corrupt American politics are. So yeah, it's very odd to hear that the Korean Korean public trusts their government.
Yeah.
But maybe relative to the US,
America,
maybe
yeah.
they do. Yeah.
Okay. I guess the reason I bring that up, maybe this is going to wrap up and bring it full circle, is that it feels like one reason that Trump won is because he at least represented something different than, let's say, the status quo, right? And I think a lot of people saw Kamala as just like, well, she's just a continuation of, let's say, Joe Biden and the previous 4 years, and it's just going to continue along this trend. More government spending, more involvement overseas, right? All these, even more inclusivity laws and things like that, right? Whereas at least Trump represented a bit of a departure from that norm. Again, for better, for worse, that's my feeling of how voters were looking at the two candidates. I think Kamala represented more of just traditional politics, which your average American just doesn't believe in or trust anymore.
I see.
And Trump, at least, he says whatever he wants, right? He at least presents as a candidate that's just, or as a president that's just going to basically say whatever he wants, do whatever he wants.
More genuine.
And, I would say operating outside of traditional, Washington, traditional politics in the U.S. So, yeah.
Me not knowing American politics, though, just like trying to observe it in a very objective lens, don't you think that, I think one of the big reasons that Kamala lost is because she didn't go through the actual process of the primary election. So in a sense, she's like, I feel like she's a less legitimate candidate.
Yeah. She didn't have to do all the debates with the other Democratic nominees.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that would have reached international news, or maybe I shouldn't be surprised because international news is more sophisticated. But yeah, I think that was a knock on her. But I never saw that being presented like front and center. Yeah. So you're right. In a sense, she was appointed by Joe Biden once he dropped out.
Yeah.
And he endorsed her. And so everyone rallied around her immediately.
Yeah.
But she never went through a Democratic convention where she had to run and debate against all the other Democratic nominees.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in a sense, you could say by default, she might be a weaker candidate.
Yeah.
But quite frankly, I don't think any other Democratic candidate who had gone through that formal, election process in the Democratic Party would have fared much better or worse, to be honest. Yeah. Maybe that's ill-informed, but that's at least my feeling.
I see.
Yeah. I think the Trump support was just too strong with the conservatives and honestly with the white population. Yeah. Depending on where you live in the U.S., it's easy to forget. Again, U.S. is still 75% Caucasian. So, yeah, that still, I think, goes a long way as far as how people vote. All right, Jun. Last topic agenda I had before ending this episode, I wanted to talk about U.S.-Korea relations and how, I guess, how Korea is affected by America. And yeah, it just, the reason I bring this up is that it feels like the world is in a very precarious position right now. There's wars going on all over the world. And I've read many articles saying, if we were ever at the precipice of like a World War III, now is the time where all these small things could happen.
Yeah.
And again, I think a Trump presidency means a more tumultuous time globally, whether it's, China making a move on Taiwan or whatever else it might be. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about that to wrap up. We mentioned it a bit, but what does this Trump presidency, how do you think it's going to impact Korea? How has Korea and America historically been aligned or not? And also, if you could talk about it, it feels like Korea and Japan have never been closer. And I don't know how you feel about that too. So,
is it? I didn't know.
That's at least my feeling. And I've read some headlines too where it seems to indicate Korea-Japan relations are the closest it's ever been.
Yeah.
And, at least the underlying thing is, okay, we're brought together because we're both allies of America. And obviously America wants us allied too to present a stronger front against the growing China.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just want to throw that out there to see if you have thoughts.
Yeah, obviously I think Korea's economy and military defense is very intertwined with America. And I think the modern Korean government and its initiation had a lot to do with the US because it was after it was liberated by Japan, which was a result of the war between Japan and the US, right? So obviously there are a lot of influences from America to begin with. And I think now because of the relationship and tension between North Korea and South Korea, and the US military has a lot to do with that, yeah, it's inevitable that we're very influenced by what the US thinks and how it acts, right? And it's also for the US, Korea and Japan are, as you mentioned, very important as a geographical location to balance out China. Yeah. What was your question?
So, okay, let me ask a more pointed question then.
Yeah.
I saw two headlines. One is around, again, I mentioned Korea-Japan relations have never been closer. But the other one was, North Korea-South Korea tensions have never been higher. And obviously, it seems like that is always a headline a bit. But at least my feeling is it feels more true now than it has before. It does feel like the world is a bit on, like, hanging in the balance, right? There's like so much going on, it feels.
Yeah.
And I do think a Trump presidency is gonna make things even more volatile, is my feeling. So yeah, just, I don't know, do those things at all come up for you more or less because of the Trump presidency?
I think whenever there's a more conservative government in Korea, tends to be more anti-China, pro-US and pro-Japan. And I think after the world witnessed how, China acted on Hong Kong, which sort of like makes you imagine how they can act on Taiwan maybe, and also how Russia can invade Ukraine that way. I think it sort of solidifies the ally system, and that's why I think maybe Korea and Japan are more in a favorable or like more friendly relationship than ever. And I think that's what the US wants, right? Yeah, I think it's just because the world right now is very unstable.
Yeah.
People are clinging on to whatever can bring more stability. Yeah.
Yeah. The one, we started this episode by talking about one of Trump's campaign policies or whatever was, we have to make sure Korea pays their fair share for our protection.
Yeah.
That really got me thinking. I think there was another article I read. Basically, all the countries in the, what is it?
NATO?
Anyway, I think the article is saying basically countries in NATO, how much money they spend on their own national defense. It's much lower than what they're, in a sense, supposed to put up. And it goes down over time. And I think that's a consequence of U.S. playing watchguard or, watchdog over the entire world. And from an American perspective, growing up in America, it always felt a given and obvious. Okay, U.S. should play watchdog over the world, right? Of course, we have to protect the weaker countries. That always seemed like a given. But once I moved outside of the U.S. and now that I'm living in Korea, I guess I questioned that. And now it's not so obvious to me that U.S. should be playing such a big role in every single country, trying to protect, democracy, quote unquote, globally. And I don't know. I will honestly say it seems kind of fair that the countries that are receiving so much protection from the U.S. do have to, kind of pay for that. But yeah, all these things are to say if Trump follows through and pulls out from playing this role globally, the world does feel like it's going to be in a very tumultuous place, very unstable, like you said. And I think North Korea, South Korea, East Asia in general, even though there's no war actively going on right now, compared to, let's say, the Middle East or Europe, it certainly feels like it could happen very easily. I don't know. That's at least my feeling.
So I think it's very tricky. My personal view is that the reason why America wants to play watchdog and become like the police of the world is not because they're just like good people.
Yeah.
It's just, it was a different order after the Cold War, where before that, the general rule was that the superpower of the world creates a lot of colonies around the world, whereas the US didn't take that route, but then like sort of providing military defense and then becoming an ally and making them economically more, related together. So that's like kind of like economical colony, if you will. Maybe this is too strong of a word, but I think that's the way that they operated. Standing on a moral high ground, because like creating colonies, obviously in the modern world has a lot of like ethical, moral issues. I think they did it in a very economical, indirect way. So I think in a way they made the Korean economy very dependent to the US economy, which I think that was, their initial plan. But now if they ask us to pay directly for that service, it's kind of tricky, isn't it? Yeah.
Most Koreans, when they read that though, they don't like it, right? Obviously.
Paying for the military service? Why would they like it? No.
Well, because they want the protection.
But we got it without having to pay for it directly.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
But I don't think Koreans would be supportive of U.S. pulling out militarily, right? To be clear, I don't think America ever would. Because this is
like
mostly
the more progressive political parties always ask for that.
Oh,
actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
More independent military defense.
Yeah.
That is not dependent to
on
the
America.
US. Yeah.
I could see why, as a Korean citizen, you would get behind that. Yeah.
But I also think that the US troops are not here 100% because they want to protect Korea. Why would they?
They want to create a wall against China and North Korea.
Yeah.
Okay. I think Ukraine, Korea, Middle East, it's all pawns for America.
Yeah.
Just to retain their global positioning.
Yeah.
So I'd agree with that. Okay. All right. I think that's a good place as any to end this episode. We never even talked about this. Yeah, this prop. I'm holding up a two-sided fan. One side has a Korean flag, one side has an American flag. I don't even know where it came from. It just appeared in my house. And as I was leaving this morning, I was like, I want to get that American flag. I have to be honest, I didn't even realize the other side was the Korean flag when I grabbed it.
Yeah.
I was just like, I should get some prop for our politics episodes.
Where did you get this from again?
I believe one of my two younger daughters brought it home from school.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so.
This is exactly what the 태극기 부대, the old people would hold in the very right-leaning protesting.
So I want to be very clear. This was not acquired through a political party in Korea. I don't know where it came from. Again, I believe one of my two daughters brought it home from their Korean school, Korean daycare or Korean kindergarten. But I thought it was the perfect prop for today. So, honestly, the perfect prop for our podcast. Because one side has the Korean flag, one side has the American flag.
Yeah.
All right. That's a wrap. Very unsatisfying episode for me. I have to say, I feel like I didn't say much of meaning, much of consequence. And what I did say was not very productive. I don't know, but at least we did our best to talk about this.
Yeah, but again, I don't think how it would ever been different.
Well, okay, let's just summarize. What are the only differences we came up with was, are there anything interesting? Term limits? I don't know.
Korea's 5-year presidency.
Yeah, 4, but 2 terms, right? So 10 years total.
No, you can't have 2 terms in Korea.
Oh, that's a big difference.
Yeah.
Oh, we should have talked about that. Right? That is a huge difference. Because 5 years is not, 8 years is a lot more. And then, what else? I wanted to make the analogy of, for Koreans to understand, like American politics, is like imagining 50 Koreas, each kind of able to do things independently.
Yeah.
Like that's why American politics is so different. Okay. Okay. Anyway, foreign policy. Like I didn't get to talk about immigration at all. That's what I really want to talk about too. Some of the major issues. Like, Jun, did you guess how many estimated illegal immigrants came into America over the last 4 years?
2 million?
Yeah. Did I already say that?
No, I just know as a fact.
That's crazy, right? For a Korean to think about 2 million illegal immigrants.
That's the size of my hometown.
It's just, I think that will give people a lot of appreciation or understanding for border control. And that's the core conflict, right? like, no one wants to deport people coming to America seeking a better life.
Yeah.
But when you start thinking about the numbers, and you have to have some sort of immigration policy or border protection, right? Like, of course, at a moral level, no one wants to deport people. They want people to come to America to be safer, to have a better life and a better future. But at the same time, like, you can't have no border, right? So you have to draw the line somewhere. And that doesn't feel good to say, but it's practical, right? And I think that's where a lot of people on the surface might not claim to have supported, let's say, Trump or the Republican Party. But deep down, they're like, oh, actually, like, it's kind of good.
Yeah.
And anyway, it's just like, those are the things I really want to talk about more. We never got to it.
I think you just did.
Oh, I wasn't saying this with the mindset of being recorded, but...
Oh, I would put it in the recording.
Okay. Anyway, that brings us to a wrap of this episode. Hopefully we have a chance to talk about these things in more detail in the future. But this was just kind of our immediate reaction to the Trump win and a very high-level overview of some of the political things in Korea versus America. So, as always, if you want to support our podcast, consider supporting us on Patreon. Our lowest tier starts at just $1 a month. So if you believe this episode is worth 25 cents to you, please consider supporting us there. You get access to our exclusive Discord, where you can discuss with other supporters things like future episode topics or talk about the latest episode with them. So thank you. And since last recording, we have one new Patreon to shout out. Thank you to Lee So-jip for your support.
So-jip. Thank you.
All right, and that's a wrap. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.
This one's really tricky to get around. Even saying that is dangerous. What do I want to say? I think I don't even know what to say. Let me just say this.
They should be called a tiptoeing episode.